Hello and welcome, everybody. As you can tell, I'm trying out the new captioning. My apologies for not turning this on earlier, but we can always learn something new. All right, we'll just let everybody come on in. If you've been here for a while, you may have seen some new features. First off, I'm using captioning, which is great because it makes sure that we're accessible to everybody. And the other one you'll notice is that we have the Q&A function open, and Shreya is going to be adding some questions here, and you are going to be upvoting the questions that you really find important, which is great. Let's see. And we are going to, I'm just letting everybody come on in. Come on in, everybody. Welcome, welcome. Hopefully you've got a nice warm beverage tonight as we take on Unit 5. Got a little bit of coffee here. We're going to give our mug a hug, and then we're going to get to work. Excellent. Come on in, everybody. All right, just again, a little bit of housekeeping, just a heads up, stream's being recorded, which is great. So for some of you that you're going to catch this later in your day or closer to the exam or to watch it again, come on. Play it at a faster speed. You can also see us on our social media applications. Happy to chat with you there. I and Shreya, my awesome TA. We will be mostly found on Discord if you want to see us on the if you want to see us outside of just Vimeo. All right, couple of things. We've got Unit 6 Cram. It's coming up close on Tuesday, April 6th, 8 p.m. If you're a macro person, you've got April 4th as well. So macro and micro, it's Cram time. Micro trivia is not actually on the schedule for the moment, but don't be deterred. Just keep an eye on the calendar. You'll see it. Shreya, if you know the date for the Unit 5 trivia, go ahead and throw it in chat so people can see it, if you don't mind. Thank you so much. All right. So also, again, come on to Discord. Shreya's got she's our micro queen. She's got some great office hours. And also, just if you've got questions, we've got a very lively little group there, and we would love to have you there. Let me see if I can turn those captions back on for you. My apologies. All right. So tonight, we're going to be doing a little bit of Content 5 review, or a Unit 5 content review. There's going to be a little bit of practice because there's a little bit of math involved. Nothing you can't handle, nothing you can't do. A little sneaky calc for you, but you won't even know it's calc. And Q&A is going to be ongoing the entire time tonight. I will have a section for questions and answers. If you just want to have a question and you just throw it in chat, go ahead. We'll pick it up at the very end. So no big deal. I hope you have some scrap paper ready to go, or a whiteboard, or maybe one of those old Zen gardens so you can actually make a graph. You're going to be graphing in your sleep at this point. So what I'd love for you to do is show off your graph in Discord when we're done. I'm just saying hashtag graphs or Discord graphs. Okay, and we have just got clarification. We don't have an AP Micro Unit 5 trivia on the calendar just yet, but don't worry, it's coming. We're just keep an eye on the calendar and you'll see it pop up. And either Shreya or myself will throw it into Discord when we get those dates. Not a big deal. We'll just clarifying some things. All right, so let's go ahead and review Unit 5. Unit 5 is tricky. It's not difficult, but it is tricky. So you have to kind of keep paying attention. And we have to go back to something that we learned back all the way in Unit 1. And we have to talk about the factors of production. So when we are talking factor markets, we're actually talking about the different square on the circular flow model than we were before. So circular flow, remember way back then, Circular flow, you've got two primary markets. The one we've been dealing with through units really 2 through 4 is the product market. It's that exchange of finished goods and services from the firms to households who are going to exchange money for that good or service. However, now we're going to look at kind of the background for this, and that is called the factor market. And the factor market is where households are going to put their goods and services up for sale, and especially their factors of production are going to be put up for auction or for sale. And the firms are going to buy those factors of production in exchange for an income. And so again, with circular flow, goods and services or factors move one way and cash moves another. So it is the cash is going to move clockwise, and you've got counterclockwise movements with goods and services, or vice versa. So I want you, as we get into the factor markets, you may actually see them called a resource market as well. So don't be fooled. It's the same thing, just different names. It's kind of like if you have a nickname for something else. So factor market is a resource market is a factor market. Households can be called individuals. Firms can be called businesses. AP can get creative on what they call things, and it's up to you to know and to recognize what exactly it is. If English is not your native language, just really make a note of that, because if English is your primary language, then you kind of can get those. But if you're used to definitions, then that's tricky. So factor market equals resource market. So just have that in your hat. So a reminder of this, when we're talking about the factor market, we're talking about the factors of production, those big FOPs. All right, the factors of production, you remember them. They're land, labor, capital, and entrepreneurship. Now, what we didn't really stress, and actually we're going to stress it big in macroeconomics with income approach for GDP, you can be with Maria for that one. But it does pop up in Unit 5 is what we call factor payments. This is what the payments you have for those factors of production. So land, you are going to pay for land or things that count as land in the form of rent. That is the factor payment for land. Labor, and I want to be clear here, this is the actual action. This is the action of working. That is going to be a wage. Remember, laborers are not for sale, but their labor is. So land equals rent, labor equals wage, capital, both human, meaning education or training, and physical capital like robots, ovens, indirect things to make goods and services. That's going to be counted in interest. Entrepreneurship, and we count that with profit, or at least we pay for that with profit. So those are the factor payments. This is, again, going to come back in Unit 2 of macro as well. I like to tell my students, because I love science fiction, especially science fiction novels. One of my first favorite science fiction novel that some of you may have read in school or just when you were younger is called Ender's Game. And in Ender's Game, there's a phrase that Ender, the main character, always tells his team before going into either a game or into a battle, because there's no real directions in space. And he says, the enemy's gate is down. And what that does is orients the entire team to one direction. So if you say left or right, you actually know what left and right is. If you say north and south, you know what that is, because you at least are all in agreement that this is down. So when we're talking about, every time you think factor market, you need to think either the enemy's gate is down, and the big thing that I like to stress to my student is you orient yourself by saying, who is demanding? Because who is demanding goods and services in this part? Because this helps you orient it, because there's going to be a few things that are tricky. In the factor market, the firm or the business is the one demanding. They're the one that's going to demand labor. So every time we deal with the factor market, and I don't care if it gets tedious, always remind yourself, okay, who is demanding? Who is demanding in this market? All right, so let's go ahead and start graphing. So go ahead and get your Gator graph out. Go ahead and get your axes out. Now, this is going to remind you a lot of P and Q, minding your P's and Q's with price and quantity. But now we're going to have to kind of remember that who is demanding. I'm in the factor market. It's no longer price. Price and quantity of goods or output, that belongs in the product market. In the factor market, we're looking at wages. Wage, remember, is the payment for labor. And then we're going to look at quantity of workers. Now, this gets a little bit more technical in university economics, but don't worry, you're doing AP. We can do this. Easy peasy. So we've got wage on the vertical axes and the quantity of workers on the horizontal axis. So go ahead, if you are graphing along, it's like a sing-along, but with more graphs. Go ahead and throw some axes up there, wage on the vertical. You've got quantity of workers on the horizontal. Some people have asked, well, do I write out quantity or do I write out workers? Can I just use QW? I always say, if in doubt, write it out. If you think the reader can be confused by what you're writing, write it out because they probably will be. So let's not let the reader be confused and lose points because the reader's confused. We are going to be very, very clear for the reader, and it takes all of 2 seconds more to do this. So all good in the neighborhood. We are going to put up our supply and our demand curve, but look at that supply and demand, because remember, who is demanding? The firm is demanding. So downward, D for down, downward, when we say demand for labor, we are talking about this inverse relationship between the quantity of labor firms are willing and able to hire at different wages. And you're like, why does it feel like it's switched? Because it is. You're in a factor market. You're not in the product market anymore. The thing is, if you're a company, you're profit seeking. You want as much profit as best bang for your buck as possible. For example, for studying for AP exams, you don't want to study 1 second more than it's going to take to get you that 5. If you need an 82% to score a 5 on this AP test, then why score a 90? Why score 100%? Why study that extra bit when you can study just enough to get the 82 to 85% to get the 5 and then go for it? Same thing here. Firms do not want to pay high wages. They want as much profit as they can. So they're willing to hire more labor or hire more workers as long as the wage is very, very low. If the wage is high, they're not willing to pay for those workers. They do not have the demand for it. Now, supply, this is going to be the laborers themselves. The laborers themselves are going to supply this labor, and this is the different quantities of labor households are willing and able to sell at different wages. This is a direct relationship. Because here's the thing, do you like babysitting your sibling? Especially since mom's probably not going to pay you. She's going to pay you with kindness you're not going to get the tone. Instead, what happens if mom says, I'm willing to pay you $100 an hour for you to babysit your sibling? You're more than willing. In fact, I'll come babysit. The thing is, the higher the wage, the more willing you are to supply your labor. The lower the wage, less willing to supply. You don't want to supply. You don't want to work for free. No free gigs. So this is the basic idea. And that's why I'm saying it takes a second every time you enter into the factor market to be like, whoa. What is this? Let me remember what this is. And so always when dealing with the factor market, the first question you ask is, who is demanding? The firm is demanding. So the firm is demand this round. Okay, got it. So slow down, especially as you go into the test and you're going to get all stressed and your time is clicking. You just need to settle down and think, who is demanding with the factor market, and let yourself think through it. Now, here's the problem. We've always an interesting political conversation is, what about minimum wage? Minimum wage this is effectively a wage floor. If you guys remember price floors from back in the day, back in Unit 2, well, this is a wage floor. That means that the wage cannot reach equilibrium. So that equilibrium point, let me go back to equilibrium for a second so you can see it. Equilibrium for demand and supply, this is the highest demand, or this is the highest that firms are willing to pay, and the lowest that workers are willing to accept in terms of wages at a certain quantity of labor. And that Q is a QL there. That's quantity of labor. You can also say quantity of workers as well if you want it to match the axes. But you want to make sure that that equilibrium, that's an equilibrium wage, that the price of that labor. All right, so now what happens if the government or ruling body sets a minimum wage? We hear about fight for 15 a lot in the US. But let's say they fought for 15 and they won. In a couple of states, you actually have this. So you have $15 wages. But what if equilibrium wage is $10? Well, what happens? Well, just like you would in the product market, if the price or wage in this situation, if the wage is above equilibrium, we're going to have a surplus of workers. And there's two distinct reasons for that. Number one, the wage cannot fall to its natural equilibrium state, which means it can't fall enough to increase the demand for it or increase the quantity of demand for labor. The other issue is that at $15 an hour, you have more people that are willing to work at McDonald's or at fast food restaurants or those entry-level jobs. They're more willing to work for 15 an hour than they are for $10 an hour. So you have more people entering the labor market than you had before. So again, minimum wage, government enforced minimum that businesses have to pay for labor. And this is going to make sure that there is a surplus of labor. Now, the surplus of labor, what we would call that surplus of labor, is the distance between the quantity of labor demanded, which is going to be 5 workers. So if you see that, so 5 workers all the way to everyone who's included, which is going to be up to 15 workers, which is the supply of labor. So if we take 15, we subtract 5, we are going to have a surplus of 10 workers who are going to be effectively not working. How many people can I actually hire at $15 an hour? Well, firms are only willing and able to pay for 5 of those workers, which means a couple of things. First off, you've got that surplus. But originally at $10, the firm employed 10 employees, but now they can only really pay for 5 at that wage. So the 5 others, the 5 that are between the original equilibrium and the new demand or the demand for labor, they actually lose their jobs because of this. And you actually see this. It's one of those really complicated bits of where economics and policy creation, that we kind of have a problem. It's like, how do we solve this issue of making sure everyone has a livable wage and yet making sure that companies are incentivized enough in order to employ them? So again, we don't really have a solution for that just yet. And guess what? That's where you guys come in. That's why we're teaching you what we know about economics so that you can help us come up with those solutions. So yeah, this is one that how can we get that win-win? How can we get people to earn a living that allows them to live without financial fear, and incentivize businesses so that they can still go for that profit? So again, don't have a good enough answer for that yet. Otherwise, we'd be implementing it. And that's where you guys come in. Help us figure that out. Now, if we've got supply and a demand of labor, we're moving. Just like demand and supply in the product market, we are going to shift, which means that supply of labor and the demand of labor are going to be moving left and right. So let's go ahead and talk about our determinants or components, if you will. You might see that one pop up on the test. Determinants or shifters a lot is used. Again, realize that it's the same thing. Don't get fooled by the wording. Understand the concept. And sometimes they'll throw curveballs at you, or they'll throw little tricky questions that change up a word just so you understand the concept. So let's talk about shifters of demand. Now, I use the acronym POP. All right, so we're going to put some POP in the factor market. So the 3 major shifters the 3 major shifters for the demand for labor are going to be productivity of the worker. For example, if something makes the worker less productive, for example, illness, or right now we've got COVID regulations. So workers are losing time on the assembly line because they're having to wash their hands, or they've got PPE issues, having to wear a mask and working within short spaces. Good for health. It's going to take a little bit from the productivity. We've got, for example, do you think your productivity has been affected by virtual learning? Do you think your productivity is going to would be affected by taking the digital exam, for example? These are little things about productivity of work. It doesn't have to be a big shift, but any shift will do something with it. Other issues, if there are substitutes and complements that are going to interfere with hiring. Now remember, who is demanding? The firm is demanding. So for example, the firm, let's say I'm working at fast food or at a fast food, Windows is the made up fast food name. So if I'm working at a hamburger place and all of a sudden wages are going up and I have to think, oh man, I can't afford that. And then all of a sudden somebody's advertising those really cool cashier kiosk, a robot, if you will, to replace a worker. Well, this is if I get a robot or a computer screen to take orders, well, it's rare that the order gets screwed up. They never have to take bathroom breaks. The computer only needs electricity and they can work all day legally, at least right now, until we get some rights with AI. So you have substitutes, also complements, things that go along with it. So we've got, well, maybe you've got if you are working the fast food market, it may be there is a shortage. For example, during COVID, the chicken houses and the chicken slaughterhouses in South Dakota, they were infected by COVID, so they had to be shut down. So getting chickens was very, very difficult. And getting workers to go work in the hen house or into the poultry houses was very difficult. And this is going to affect how Windows is going to be hiring here, because there may be some issues with complements and substitutes for those hirings and things that go along with the workers. The other big issue, and the one that I really want you to kind of underline, because we're going to come back to this, is derived demand. And this is going to be related with the price of the output. So if the output, I want you to think about fidget spinners. Now, fidget spinners were big things back in 2017. All my students were spinning them around. You had all sorts of things going around. Well, when did other companies want to join in with other fidget spinners? It wasn't when fidget spinners were just, no one said, oh man, those are cool, we're going to make some more of those. It was when the price of the fidget spinners started to go up. When it started to increase, all of a sudden other companies wanted to jump in and produce more fidget spinners, which means they had to hire more people. The demand for workers from price of the output. Okay, ready? Remember, who's doing the demanding? The firms are wanting to do the demanding, and they want to keep his wages as low as possible to have the highest profit possible, because wages factors into total cost. So with that in mind, they are going to say, okay, if I to get more products at this price made, I have to hire more people, so be it. The demand for labor, ready, is derived from the demand of the product because of the price. So this is what we call derived demand. And we're going to be coming back to this. Now, what about supply for labor? Now, this is you usually. When you go for your first job, and let's say you've got a couple of job offers, you've got some things to think in mind. For example, some things will shift the supply of labor. For example, worker education and training. Is the employment center, is it near some place where people are able and willing to be trained or already have been for this job? Do they have access to education? That worker education and training can shift supply of labor both left and right. Either you've got lack of training, you have increased training or more accessible. Either way, going to be shifting supply of labor. You also have alternative work options. For example, if you are working as a teacher, you've got a couple of things you can do. You can teach school, you can work in marketing, you can do all sorts of other jobs. Well, if there's more jobs there and you can do pretty much all of them, well, what are you going to do? Probably follow the wage and go with the highest wage. Also, immigration and worker mobility are big factors here with supply of labor. For example, if you've got a lot of people who are competing for that one job, you're probably going to have to take a lower wage in order to compete with all of them and to get that job. If workers are willing to move away, if they're willing to go somewhere else, well then if business may have to raise their wages in order to attract them to theirs. So if the workers are locked in, they don't have to. So if you're not willing to go a mile away from your house in order to go to work, well, then you may have to take a lower wage because they know they got you. Cultural expectations is another one. Again, I used to work in Asia. There is a cultural expectation around work. In Korea, you're working or South Korea, you're working really at the crack of dawn at 7 a.m. all the way till 9 o'clock at night. You don't leave until the boss leaves, and you're not getting paid very much, and you know it. It's an expectation. However, when you go into the United States, the cultural expectation is that you negotiate for a wage. So the cultural expectations are going to come in. Also, cultural expectations of working. Are you expected to work when you're 3? Not in the United States. That is not legal. But in other countries, if you are able to walk, you're probably working because it's needed for the family. You have other issues, like you have other cultural expectations of wages. You've got cultural expectations of when you join the workforce. For example, if you're a female, do you join types of jobs? That's going to be dependent too. Leisure preferences. Sometimes you don't want to take a job because there's a lot of work involved. For example, if you're going to be a lawyer, for the first couple of years of your career, get ready to work over 100 hours a week. And there's no vacations, and you're going to be very, very busy. If you want to go anywhere in the medical field, you're going to be working on call for 24 to 48 hours. You're not going to be home while you're doing while you're doing your shift that you've got. You may have to leave your family and sacrifice that for a little bit. So you may want to take a job that's related to your dream career, but maybe not necessarily that career because you desire a little bit more leisure time. Maybe, and that's not a bad thing. That's a choice. For example, spending time with your kids and watching them grow up and not working during that time, that's not a bad thing. It's a choice. It's just know the choice. Also, working conditions. If you may not be willing to supply your labor no matter what the wage is for underwater welding, one of the higher paid jobs, by the way. So or working on an overseas oil rig in the North Atlantic where it's freezing cold and they tend to have some fires and not well visited and you're by yourself. So working conditions can factor into what that supply of labor is going to look like and if it shifts. All right. And once again, if you've got questions, go ahead and throw them into Q&A or even chat. All good. All right. So if we are going to, I want you to go ahead and practice. All right. So we're going to go ahead and practice a little bit. Go ahead and graph. We're going to set our table first because remember, whenever we do shifts or change or what we call analysis, if we're looking at factor demand and factor supply analysis, we need to first set our table. You can't eat your meal until you set your table. So we're going to do this in 3 steps. We're going to set our table, meaning we show this at equilibrium. So if you look at the graph I've got for you, I've modeled for you, that's setting the table. It's a set table. Then we're going to show the change. We're going to identify, by showing the change, we identify which determinant is affected. And then we're going to shift that line. And then thirdly, we're going to add in where this new equilibrium will be. Will the new equilibrium be, what will that be in terms of wage and the quantity? So go ahead. Go ahead and do your best. So do your best to graph what happens and then try to explain your result in Discord. Well, and hold on to that graph. We'll show your graph at the end. If you want to, if you got your phone nearby, go ahead and Snapchat your graph and send it to a friend. Leave them very confused. Hashtag Discord graphs, micrographs. So go ahead and give that a shot. If you're watching this on replay, you can go ahead and pause. Okay, if you're not done yet, it's okay. We'll let's see if we match a little bit. Okay, so education if what happened, and actually this is what Google is actually offering. If you haven't been following the news, it's kind of fun. So what happens in the factor market if Google offers a college equivalent education online for only $200 US? Well, that is way south of the $72,000 from New York University. And what could happen, or what would you rather take if you had for $200 if you could get the same degree as NYU or the same education? So there's no minimum wage here. So the factor that's going to be activated is education. So now at a cheaper price or a decreased price, we are going to get an increase in people who are able to supply labor, because now we have a lot more people who have access now to that to offer this job, and so we're going to have a shift to the right for the supply of labor. Okay, so that's going to be shifting worker training. And then, so that's step 2. We're going to make a second line of, see that red line? We're going to make a second one that's to the right. I'm going to show 2 ways of movement, or two signs of movement. I've got supply of labor 1, followed by supply of labor 2, so to suggest direction. And then I've added an arrow between 1 and 2, showing the reader, hey, this is moving to the right. And what does this do to wage? Well, the wage, if I move to the right and without minimum wage, that you have way more people who are competing for the same job, which means they're going to have to take a lower wage. So now the wage becomes $8 an hour. And I had hired 40 people before, but now I can hire 60. But the only way I can get 60 workers, I can get that 20 increase, is by lowering the wage, because then the firms will demand more because it's cheaper to hire those people. Again, if you've got questions, go ahead and throw them either into the Q&A section, throw them in chat. Happy to do so. Happy to answer things. Okay, let's do another one. What happens in the factor market if cryptocurrency takes off and more people need hardware crypto wallets? So people need hardware crypto wallets, and I want you to think about what that does in the product market and then what it's going to do with the factor market. All right, if you're watching this on replay, go ahead and hit pause. I'm just noticing the captions. And I did say hit pause, and yet caption says I hit pots. I'm amused. This is good times. Welcome to Micro. Oh, apparently welcome to Micro. No, Micro. There we go. Thank you, caption. Okay, let's see how we did. So in this situation, if you haven't been following crypto and the crypto surge, you may not even know there were such a thing as hardware crypto wallets. Treasurer's got one. There's a few people who don't want to get hacked. So they have an off-grid or an offline crypto wallet. It's kind of interesting to watch in terms of fintech needs. So what happens? Well, now we're into labor. We're into demand for labor here, because we got an issue here, because now those Trezor wallets have become, or those hardware crypto wallets, at first, no one was really willing to buy them at any price. And now with the surge, we have a lot of retail buyers into crypto, and especially into Bitcoin. And what's happening is that the price of those hardware crypto wallets has risen. So because of the new demand and limited supply of them. So in the product market. So the product market's increase of price of the output means that the labor demand, because the firm wants to make more of these so that it can make more profit. And because it needs more laborers to make these products that make more profit for them, they are willing to hire them even if it's at a higher wage. This is what we mean by derived demand. That firms don't care, maybe some employers do, but firms themselves, as an organization, they do not care directly about employees. They care about profit margin and about that product and the chase for that profit. So employees are incidental. The demand for them is derived from that chase or that demand for the profit. Now, the ethics of that, we can talk about all day. But guess what? We're not going to. Instead, we're going to hang out with just the basic economic concept of that derived demand. That people get hired at a higher wage because the firm needs more product. Thus, they are willing to hire more producers of that product, more labor. That they don't really want to, but they'll do it if they have derived demand. All right, let's go ahead and go into 5.3, and this is going to be profit maximizing behavior in perfectly competitive factor markets. So again, there's 4 sections of Unit 5, and you're going to know them. And so some of you who know this, and you're just kind of using this for Cram, you may be like, oh no, factor markets have market structures. Yes. Now, if you remember in the product market, we went over 4 distinct market structures because we needed to figure out where MR equals MC in the product market. So if you remember, we had perfect competition, monopolistic competition. We had, this is kind of a reminder of what we did last week. We had oligopoly, that was the game theory one, followed by the only one firm, which is monopoly. Well, the good news is we only are going to need to know 2 types of factor market structures in the factor market. So market structures in the factor market, we're going to keep them at their extremes. We're just going to talk about perfect competition in the factor market, and we're going to talk about a thing that is fun to say, which is monopsony, but that's 5.4. So we're going to start off with just perfect competition. So a perfectly competitive factor market has the following characteristics. So you just kind of know which ones they are, and remember, think who's doing the demanding. It's the firm doing the demanding. So I want you to think about perfect competition. What were the characteristics of it in the product market? Well, in the product market, this was identical goods. This was many different sellers. This was individual businesses. The firm itself was a price taker. They couldn't fix their own price, and you had perfectly identical products. Okay, there's going to be a lot of things familiar here with perfectly competitive factor markets. Number one, and now remember, who's doing the demanding? We're going to orient ourselves here. We have many small businesses and firms that are hiring. Okay, so product market, many firms, many firms that are producing. In the factor market, we have many small businesses that are hiring. They're the ones demanding. So worker skills are going to be identical. You have, so worker skills are identical, and I'm going to use the example of volleyball refs. I love volleyball. I love watching volleyball, and the referees, their skills should be, but we all know there's some that are better than others. So should be identical. They should be very fair. They should be able to see when the ball is in and out. Couple of games, I question that, but we won't go there. So they should be able to see. They should be able to be fair. They should have the same exact skills. You shouldn't have bad ref or good ref. You should just have ref, volleyball referees. In a perfectly elastic factor market, the wage here is going to be perfectly elastic. And thus, workers are going to be wage takers. The referees themselves are going to be wage takers. So let's talk about what this looks like in the factor market. Go ahead and let's graph this out together. So we're going to get our factor market graph going. So on the vertical axis, go ahead and throw wage up there. On the horizontal axis, we're going to go ahead and throw quantity of workers. All right, we've got supply of labor, upward sloping, demand, D for down, Downward sloping demand for labor. And who's doing the demand? Firms are demanding. Equilibrium, where those two lines meet, is going to be $10 a game and 40 referees for that game, or for all the schools' games. Go ahead and throw that in together. So for the entire games on a Tuesday night, or on a Thursday night, we can go now. So on a Thursday night, there are 40 refs needed all through the county, or referees needed that are all through the county, and they're all going to be making $10. If the company raises the wage, if the wage raises, so if we go over here, if the wage goes north to say 12, well, then you're going to have a surplus of labor, and some of your labor is going to be, and some of your refs are going to have to cut. If it's too low, well, then you're going to have a shortage. Or if the wage is too low, you won't have the supply of it because nobody wants it. So a couple of things before we go on. Let's get some math here. It's not bad math. Stick with me. It's easy math. Okay. So it's going to look a lot like a perfectly competitive product market. Okay. So that means that we're going to have two graphs here. It's going to be side by side. So we're going to have a market. We're going to have the industry level side of the market, and we're going to have the individual, or the individual company. But it's a different issue since we're just looking at workers and we're looking at hiring. So in here, I need you guys to like underline this in your notes, star it, get ready for it. So we're going to, okay, hang on. Move the graph shifts. So the demand for this does not move this graph and the supply shifts to the right. Okay, sorry, I'm just checking on the Q&A for a second. Hang on. I know I should have shifted one. So anonymous, I'm sorry. I should have shifted one. I may go back. I may go back to that one. Let's wait for Q&A on that one, or let me wait to the end and then I'll come back to it because I'm hoping I didn't make a mistake. I'm not saying I never do. It happens, but I'm hoping I didn't. All right, but let's go back to price for a second. So let's go ahead and a couple of things. So we're going to look at, you guys remember marginal revenue and marginal costs. So with producing and products, okay. So remember MR equals MC, that fun profit maximization thing. But here's the thing, this is about workers. So we have what's called marginal resource cost. Marginal resource cost meaning what is the cost of adding one more resource. So in this situation, and most in AP Econ is going to be having to do with labor. Rarely will it, but it does happen. Rarely will it be talking about something other than workers. It's just that workers make for really easy math. So, and remember for paper-based, for the first administration, no calculators, no notes. So with the third and with the June situation, that's a whole different issue. But for the paper-based administration one, you are going to not have a calculator with you. So they know this. And so they're going to give you math that's at least doable. Okay, so let's go ahead. And so this is the marginal resource cost, the cost of adding in one more labor. So that's the amount needed to add or hire one new worker. How we get there, the MRC is going to be equal to a change. That's that delta sign there, if you ever wondered. A change in total cost. Okay, so what was the old number, or what's the new number minus the old number? So what's the change in total cost over the change in inputs? Now, this is where the math gets kind of easy because what they usually do is they add one more worker. So your change of input is usually 1. So whatever the change in total cost is usually it. All right, that's why, but just know, sometimes they do throw a curveball in occasionally where they'll have 2, like what happens if we go from 2 workers to 4. And you need to know that it needs to be divided by 2 because it's the change in inputs or workers is going to be 2. We also have what's called, now careful, be very, very careful here. The R is not the same. It's not marginal resource product. This is marginal revenue product. Now careful, because if the thing is, if you understand, or if you know what the acronym stands for, it's really easy to kind of, or I should say it's easier. but it's easier to kind of sort out what they mean and what they're really wanting. So marginal, additional, so think one more. What is the amount I'm making from this? How much am I making from the additional product? For each additional thing, for each additional worker, how much more revenue am I making? So the way I find that is I look at the change in total revenue over the change in inputs. So in a perfectly competitive factor market, the MRC is constant for the firm because wage is set by the factor market. So what this looks like, and you should already kind of have it in your head, oh, I know what this looks like in terms of graphing, but let's actually kind of work it out. Let's do some math. All right, so if MRC is the change in total cost over the change in inputs, and the MRP is the change in total revenue over the change in total inputs, the price of the good is $5, and the wage for each worker is $15. Let's see if we can figure out the rest. I've given you the amount of workers, and I've given you the total output. Now, you need to think additional. So in this situation, we're talking about additional. So if we're talking about 0 workers, well, 0 workers working together produce nothing. All right, this is not an ex nihilo sort of thing. So if I hire 1 person, I get 8 outputs, or I get 8 products. Okay, so 1 person, I get 8 things. All right, your product market memory should be kicking in here. If I hire, now this is crucial, if I hire the second worker, so the first worker is still working. Adam is still working. Well, here comes, but Adam's making 8 units by himself, but then I hire Barbara. So Adam is still working, but now Barbara is helping out. And with their powers combined, they make 20 units, or what we would say output. They have created 20 products. Well, now I add Carl. So now when we're talking about 1, 2, and 3, we're not talking about separately. We're saying it's the third one, that it's 1 person plus the second person and the third person, and with their powers combined, how much more or less can they make? Because at some point we get a too many cooks in the kitchen situation, and they start getting in each other's way. So think about what the price is going to be, the price of the good. Think about what the wage is. Think about your marginal product. Go back to MRC, go back to total revenue, go back to MRP. I'm just looking at the time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say pause here if you're on replay. For the rest of you, we're going to see how far you can get. If you can, try to go horizontally and not necessarily, I guess you could do vertically. There's parts. Now, what's the thing about the price? Well, the price is probably going to stay constant, which means the price is the same no matter what. So if we look at the price is going to be $5 the entire way. It doesn't change. So the price, we can just fill that in. But now we look at the marginal product. Now remember marginal product? We see the change in total product over the change in inputs. All right. So with this 1 worker here, I go from 0 to 1. But my marginal product, I go from 0 to 8. So what's my marginal product change? Hey, 8 units. How excellent. All right. So going from 8 to 20, well, that's 12 units difference. And I went from 1 worker to 2. So that's a change of 1. And so I've got a marginal product of 12. Okay, great. Now let's talk about marginal revenue. All right. Or I'm sorry, marginal resource costs. Fell into my own trap. So marginal resource costs in a perfectly competitive factor market. Remember that the marginal resource cost is the same. It is perfectly elastic. It will not change because the wage is set by the factor market. And so the individual firms have to abide by that same wage. So it's going to be 15 all the way down. All right. So all the way even to the 7th worker, we are going to see it all the way down. Now, total revenue, P times Q. So price times the quantity. So 5 times 0, 0. 5 times 8, 40. Now you can do different things here, and that's fine. All right, you could do the difference. You could do difference of marginal product multiplied by the price. That works as well. So like 8 times 5. The marginal product with 1 worker is 8, multiply it by 5, bada bing, you got your 40. All right, so a couple of different ways to do this. If you want to talk about total revenue, you can, because usually these kind of questions, they're going to ask you about anyway, so you might as well know it. And then we're going to look at the marginal revenue product. What's the change? So with total revenue, we get MRP for 0. Well, we haven't changed at all, so it's not really marginal yet, unless I'm doing a partial derivative. But then I'm going to go from 0 to $40. So from for my revenue, I'm going from 0 to 40. So with the addition of one person with Adam, I have a $40 MRP. Great, right? And then I go on, we've got $60 MRP, but notice what's happening. MRP is going to look a lot like MP. All right, they're very much related here. Now, if I were to graph this out, here we go. All right, so with the volleyball market, so I live in Palm Beach County in Florida, and we've got a ton of different schools. So we're going to set the wage a little bit more Palm Beach County like. All right, so the volleyball market volleyball referee market with all the different schools on any given Thursday night, you need 40 referees. So the wage, that equilibrium, is going to be $75. That's negotiated for all these individual referees. So $75 per game. Sweet gig. Everyone should be a volleyball referee, and a good one. We need more. However, look at that. See how that's a dotted line to the equilibrium part? And because those are negotiated by the market, there's no enforcing that. As soon as we get to the solid lines, that means it's forced. All right, so to be efficient here, we're going to have to profit maximize here. We've got Benjamin High School. So Benjamin High School, it has its MRP, which is going to be equal to its demand for labor. That MRC, that marginal resource cost, remains constant. The wage is going to be $75 no matter what. That's going to serve as our supply of labor. For Benjamin High School, where MRC equals MRP is going to be 2 refs. It's going to be 2 refs. We can't, to hire 3, our MRC is going to be greater than our MRP. And if we just hire 1, well, that's not enough, because I haven't squeezed the last drop of juice out of the orange, so to speak. So we're going to hire volleyball refs until MRP equals MRC. So this is profit maximizing in the factor markets. It's making sure I absolutely get as much as I can. Okay, so let's go ahead and so let's go back to Google making education and training cheaper and more accessible. So what's going to happen to the software market and Tina's Tech House? All right, so here we go. So we've got supply of labor, because remember, now think, who is demanding the labor? That's going to be, in this situation, who's demanding the labor? The firm is demanding the labor. All right, so what we're going to have is that we shift again supply, because education, when we're talking supply of labor, that is the person that's hiring. More people are able to compete in this market because they have access to education. So we're going to see that supply of labor shift to the right. My apologies. Shift to the right. So if we shift to the right here, this hits the demand for labor on a lower spot than it did than the original equilibrium. So we go from having 100 people at $35 an hour to, well, I should have put 150 people at $25 an hour. More since the demand for labor hasn't changed in the situation, the only way to get more people to accept that labor is to lower the wage. And if Tina's Tech House is part of a perfectly competitive factor market, they can't help it. Their MRC has to fall, goes from $35 to $25. So we notice what I've done. I've marked it SL1, MRC equals your supply of labor. That's 1. We are going to lower it or decrease it, showing an arrow for direction. And that's also going to increase, it's going to increase the quantity of workers demanded from Tina's Tech House. They can go from 3 workers to 5 on this situation. That means 5 of the 150 of the software market are going to be controlled by or hired by Tina's Tech House. So again, this is going to be an increase of accessibility to education, means more people can join the competition in the software factor market. Yay. All right. Let me just check here real quick. Okay, we're still moving. All right. So if you've ever ordered food from a kiosk rather than a cashier, you know what I'm talking about. Businesses have to, and this one, I'm going to kind of move through it because you guys have kind of done this before when we talked about maximizing utility back in, I believe, the end of Unit 1 or beginning of Unit 2. So businesses must decide the profit maximizing mix of resources. To do so, we use what's called the least cost rule. And that means we got to find what is the marginal product per dollar. Now, this is when we mix resources. When do you hire a robot? When do you hire a human? And what is the profit maximizing combination of them? So to find that, I got to find the marginal product per dollar, which means I take marginal product, your MP, and I divide it by the price or the wage of the resource. Least cost rule, your MP1 over P1 should equal MP2 over P2. So we're going to look at an example here. If you're a late night diner called the Awful Waffle, you can buy or use kiosk, those little robot cashiers or computers, to take food orders for $15 an hour, meaning if we factor in the cost of it, the energy. But the thing is, they don't get the orders wrong. They don't need a break. They don't need a bathroom break or anything like that. Or you can hire human waiters or waitresses for about $10 an hour. How many do you hire with the $45 you have budgeted per hour? So you have $45 per hour budgeted. What's the mix of resources you're going to use? All right. So the thing is, we got to make ourselves a grid. I need to know if I hire the first worker, the second worker, the third worker, and the fourth worker. I've got my marginal product for the kiosk, which costs $15 an hour, is 45. So my marginal product, I get 45 waffles, let's say, 30, 15 with the third, and then with the fourth robot or fourth kiosk, I get 5. With the human, I have who cost me $10 an hour. I get 30. I get a marginal product of 30. With the second, I get 20. With the third, I got 10, and with the fourth, I get 5. All right, real quick, we got to figure out our MP over P for both of these, for both robots and for humans. What do? Well, I take the 15, divide it by 45, take 45, divide it by the price, which is 15, and I should get 3. For the human, I should get 3 as well, because we're going, but then what does it do? So let's go ahead and sort this out. Sorry, I'm kind of just looking at my time here. I'm sorry. Did I change the numbers? I'm so sorry. I changed the numbers on myself. Let's use this one with a little bit of the answers because this makes more sense. And I will change it on the slide and we'll change that into Airtable as well for you. This one makes more sense. So if my marginal product is 50, all right, I've got a human who cost me 10. I'm going to take that 50 and divide it by the $10 price. I'm going to get a marginal product per price or per dollar I get 5. Okay, well, I definitely want that 5. All right, that's my biggest bang for my buck. But then if I got 40 divided by 10, well, that's going to be 4. So again, that's more than anything else I've got. So I'm going to take the first human, the second human, and then I'm going to take the third human too, because I still have 3. But if I add this together, I've got $30 that I've used so far, because human cost me $10. So 3 humans times 10, $30. Well, I've got 45. So I've not profit maximized yet. So I'm going to grab that first robot because the first robot gives me 3 MPs per P. All right. So my proper combination here, my least cost rule, notice my MP over P1, that's this guy right here, 3, is going to equal my final MP2 over P2, which is that 3. So that should be equal, and will be on your AP exam. So if I want to profit maximize, I need to hire 3 humans and 1 kiosk. That's profit maximization. All right. Let me go ahead. Got one more piece here, guys. As we go into a monopsony, I am going to go a little bit over time, but hang with me. So monopsonistic markets. Let's talk about monopsonies. Monopsonies are going to look it's going to look very familiar. And by that, I mean, it's going to look a lot like an upside down monopoly. So monopsony characteristics, there's only one firm hiring. So for example, if you are a nurse or a doctor and there's only one hospital within 50 miles, if you're in the middle of nowhere, Alaska, which I'm sure is a town there, or in the middle of Wyoming or in the plains of South Dakota, that if you're kind of on your own, there may only be one hospital within 50 miles. So you've got only one big firm hiring. The firm has a big enough market control that they can pretty much dictate the market. So workers aren't able to move or get to another market easily. For example, this is that worker mobility. You may have a lot of families that are near playgrounds or they're near a good school. And so parents don't really want to leave that community. So they're willing to work at a lower paying job in order for their kids to go to a good school. We all make sacrifices. You may one day as a parent as well. And that's great. In this situation, the firms are going to be wage makers. Just like a monopoly is a price maker, they are not a price taker. Okay, as long as they don't wage discriminate, meaning that they can give different employees different wages, they are wage makers. But the problem is why can't they just charge or they just make or pay the lowest wage possible? Because the thing is they want to hire somebody. So if they want to hire somebody, it means that they have to lower that wage. So let's take a peek at this. So let's go ahead. And I want you to remember that in a perfectly competitive labor market, your supply of labor becomes in the firm, it becomes equal to the marginal cost, that the marginal resource cost stays constant. It's perfectly elastic. So it's perfectly, I think, horizontal. So if we look at the wage rate, at $8 an hour, ain't nobody going to be taking that job. That's way too low. At $8.50, there's one worker who really, really needs, there's Adam again. Adam really needs work. So there's one person. So what's the total cost of the company? Probably 1 times 8.5. Okay, so $8.50. What's the marginal resource cost? Probably the same because you're going from nothing to $8.50. Okay, now here's what you need to look at though. When you go into look at your total cost, and you're going to look at the difference between the total cost, because remember, marginal resource cost is going to be the change in total cost over the change in inputs. And for the sake of time, if you're on replay, go ahead and pause and finish this graph. But if you're hanging with me live, we're going to move ahead. So if you notice, now be careful here because that's why I kind of added the total cost so you can actually see it. $8.50. So what's the total cost? $8.50. Marginal resource cost becomes $8.50 as well. 9 times 2, $18. It's going to cost me $18 per hour here. The difference between $18 from 50 cents, we've got a marginal resource cost change of $9.50. At $9.50, we have 3 workers. I get $28.50. The difference between 18 into 28.5 going to be $10.50. Okay. This tends to throw people just a tiny bit. Slow down, figure out who's demanding, and you'll be okay. All right, but notice what's happening. The wage rate, remember our MR, is not equal. That wage rate, what people are going to actually, the actual demand here is not equal to the marginal resource cost. If we were to graph this out, so in a monopsony, MRC will not be the same as supply. So let's go ahead and we're going to spend a couple extra minutes. I'm going to help you practice this, and I want you guys to post this in Discord when you're done. We're almost there. All right, go ahead and throw your axes. Don't forget to orient yourself in the factor market by asking who's demanding. Remember, axes first and label, label, label. All right, make sure you label because make sure you haven't confused this with price and quantity. You're going to panic when you're going to panic a little bit. You're going to get those stress hormones rocking and rolling through your system when you sit down for that test. So just know I need to ask myself those questions. I need to calm down. I need to make sure that my axes are correctly labeled. So wage on the horizontal, wage on the vertical, quantity of workers on the horizontal. Now in this situation, this should look oddly familiar because all this is an upside down monopoly graph. It's upside down. And it's mirror, mirror on the wall in some cases. Remember, in a monopoly, the demand curve is always to the left, always to the right of the MR curve. But in this situation, it's the same deal. You've got supply is always to the right of the MRC. All right, so think of upside down monopoly. So in a monopsony, MRC will not be the same as supply. we're going to have the supply of labor to the right of the marginal resource cost. All right, so go ahead and throw your axes up there. It should look like a yelling Pac-Man up there. Now let's go ahead and add in our demand curve. Demand, downward sloping, but who's doing the demanding? The firm is demanding. So demand for labor is going to equal our marginal revenue product. It's downward sloping. Great. Go ahead and throw that in. Again, if you're on replay, you can pause, make it pretty. Now, go ahead and find where MRC equals MRP. Okay, so we're going to profit maximize. So MRP equals MRC, put a little dot there, and then drop a line down. I live in a boating community, and so drop an anchor, so to speak. Drop a line directly down from where MRP equals MRC, but do not set the wage. Don't guess wage yet. Hang in there. So just drop it down because that's going to tell you the quantity of workers necessary in this monopsony. Okay, this is going to tell me how many people I need to hire. All right, but the thing is, we're not going to set the wage there. That's way too high of a wage. I'm a monopsony. I get to make some decisions here. I have control of the market because remember, high wages means lower profits. I'm going to charge the bare minimum wage necessary to get the amount of workers that I need. So this is where I'm going to then find where the supply of labor is. So I drop my anchor down, and then where it intersects that supply of labor, that's where I set my wage. So go from the MRC to MRP dot, directly down from the SL curve, place another dot, and that's your wage. What I'd love for you to do is to post your graphs. Go ahead and post your graphs onto Discord. Okay, post your graphs on Discord. Be kind of fun. Talk about labor. And now let's go ahead and answer some questions, and we're going to use the chat box for this one. We got some Q&A. Let's see. So demand does not move for this graph when supply shifts towards the right. No, we're not going to do double shifts right now. And really, that's going to be a rare ask that they, so I'm sorry, Anonymous, that's a rare ask to do a double shift in the factor market. Factor market typically confuses a lot of students. So they're going to really kind of move one thing or the other. And you'll see, they love monopsonies. You'll see those. And really, you'll see a fair slice of perfectly competitive factor markets in there as well. If you know the concept, you're going to be okay. And really, with all of this, you guys are going to be okay. We're all going to make it through it. All right. So I'm going to just kind of hang out for a second, see if anyone else has any questions that they want to ask. And remember, we're here on Discord, as well as Sharia, the micro queen, who really is amazing. If you guys haven't really kind of gone into our Discord, asked some questions, great stuff. I'm so impressed with some of the answers that I've seen in there. It's like, you guys are future micro teachers. Well, I mean, you actually are micro teachers. You just don't have the title and the pay yet. You will. Don't worry. Hang in there. You'll be changing that world someday. Okay. I'm going to just hang out for a second, see if anyone has any questions. I hope so. I hope you're having a great week. Got big holidays this weekend. Some schools are out. It's a great time to study or celebrate with your family if that is what you're doing. Okay, guys, I'm not seeing anything else pop up. Oh, here we go. By the way, I was referring to slide 11 in the text question. Okay, let's go ahead and look at slide 11. My apologies. Thank you for hanging in there. Let's go for it. Okay, in this situation, we are just in slide 11. The thing is that if Google offers a college equivalent of education, this is going to be a shifter of supply of labor. This is just supply. Think of supply of labor as the people. There's more people that now have access to education. And so now they can enter that market and they are supplying their labor. The demand for this labor hasn't hit yet. So I guess you could see if you can argue it from a demand for labor perspective, if this was a productivity. But in most things with AP, don't overthink the question. So in this situation, this is just supply of labor shifting out. But thank you for clarifying, Anonymous. That helps out a lot. Now, the demand that we were talking about before That's going to be your POP. So let me see if I can get that one here. That's your productivity of the worker, other resources such as substitutes, complements, or the derived demand. So let me go to derived demand real quick. Oops, come back. So derived demand, that's going to be the price of the good itself. So, I can see where you can argue that the price shifts for a Google education. But usually if you see anything talking about education, you're talking about the supply of the labor market. But great question. And thank you for asking. Take some guts. All right, let's see. Anything else in chat? All right, guys. Well, I'm going to clean up a few typos I see in here, and I'm going to re-upload that to Airtable for you guys. And I'm going to enjoy rewatching these captions. Some things are great. All right, folks. I hope you have just a wonderful week. Have a restful break if you have a break at your school. If not, we're going into the weekend, and we only have a few more weeks left to prepare for this AP exam, and you guys are going to be okay. And not only that, you're going to thrive. And so enjoy. We'll talk to you guys soon. Don't let anybody fool you too badly with April Fool's Day, and I'll see you guys on Tuesday. Thank you so much for coming around.